the usual thing is like one guy infiltrates, and then he's pretty much on his own. There may be a backup team monitoring him, but it's pretty dicey. But they came up with a strategy to get actually invited in.
That's right.
It was brilliant.
It was a brilliant strategy. Part of the challenge in joining the Hells Angels is the fact that they are very nervous about who they let in, only people they trust. So at most, exactly, the cops might send in one guy who might be able to use another informant as a reference, and he'll sort of sneak in. What the Arizona ATF cops came up with was the idea is, let's get a group of cops and some other informants to set up a sort of fake puppet club of another group. They called it the Solo Angels. Let's have them ride around town and sort of get known. They would quickly catch the attention of the Hells Angels, but they wouldn't try, the best way to, it's the old sting operation, the best way to launch a sting against somebody is to make them want to be the victim of the sting. So the cops didn't knock on the Hells Angels' door and say, oh, please let us in, because that would raise suspicions. Instead, they had their own club, they were riding around, acting tough, and the Hells Angels started looking at them and say, who are these guys? And they got to know them and got to like them, and the Hells Angels kept sort of saying, well, you've got to do work for us. And the cops were sort of very standoffish. Well, we have our own club, we kind of like it. And more, the Hells Angels started liking these tough guys, started selling them guns. They had a cover story that they were gun runners, that they were selling guns to Mexico.
That meant they weren't threats to the Angels, who were big in the drug thing, but not so much with guns.
That's right, and they were seen, and they did some assistance and some help, and they went to parties. There's a great picture in the book where Sonny Barger, the best-known leader of the Hells Angels, is at a Hells Angels party, and he's surrounded by a dozen bikers, and every single one of them is an undercover cop except one other biker.
That's a wonderful picture. It's just brilliant.
And it worked. The Hells Angels trusted these guys, and they were able to infiltrate and gather a lot of intelligence and information, and eventually lay charges against a substantial number. At the same time, it was a very risky and ultimately costly operation, in the sense that at any time, of course, these people could be exposed. There was, in fact, one biker at least who began to have strong suspicions.
Rico.
He sort of said, hey, I don't trust these guys. I did some checking on them. Nobody else knows about them. And the other bikers sort of started getting nervous. And Jay Dobbins, the hero, the undercover cop who leads this operation and is the leader of the Solo Angels, has to do some last-minute scrambling to sort of convince the other Hells Angels that he's for real.
Fortunately, they have those photographs and things.
That's right. The Solo Angels were a real Mexican group, but they sort of only have an official presence in the United States. So what the cops did is they would go with their Solo Angels patches, they call themselves Solo Angels Nomads, and go to various Solo Angels events. So there were pictures of Jay Dobbins, the cop, sort of standing, doing protection for one of the visiting Solo Angel leaders during a bike run, and he would show these photos, which weren't stage photos, they were real photos. Photos of him that the Solo Angels had put up in their Tijuana clubhouse, and he would tell the Arizona bikers, the Hells Angels, look, how could I be fake? Look at these pictures of me next to the leaders, and it worked. They were able to stay in for the longest time. At one point, they even faked a death.
Yeah, tell me about the death of Pops.
That's right. They wanted to convince the Hells Angels that they were really tough guys. So, and they also knew that the Hells Angels hated the Mongols, who were a rival gang in California. Pops was another undercover informant who was working for the cops. They had to ease him out of the operation. How to get rid of him then in an easy way? Well, they figured out, we'll tell them that Pops has been killed, and then we are going to kill the Mongol who killed him in revenge. So they staged a fake murder with another cop. They got the homicide cops to help them. They put cow blood and cow liver on the head of a cop, drenched him in blood, tied his hands and his legs behind him, put him in a shallow grave, took pictures of it, and actually practiced the murder so they would be able to recount how they did it, how they swung the bat, where they fired the gun, and then brought back the pictures to the Hells Angels to show them, and also brought back the cut, as it's called, the Mongol jacket, which is almost like a scalp. which they got from another operation. And the Hells Angels were so impressed, heartbroken that Pops, their beloved friend, who they didn't know was an informant, had died, but just so thrilled that these solo angels had killed this evil Mongol. So it was a great piece of guerrilla theater.
Canadian flag, red and white, and Canada, the red and white is also Hells Angels color.
It's quite remarkable that Canada, which is generally known as a peaceful country, not a lot of crime, has a reputation around the world for extreme biker violence and criminality. Look, in the United States, there are 1,000 members of the Hells Angels. We have more than 550. 1 out of every 5 Hells Angels in the world is in Canada. More importantly, even in the United States, in California, the birthplace of the Hells Angels, they're not number one. They have to look over their shoulder all the time for other competing groups like the Mongols and the Bandidos. They're powerful, the Hells Angels. They're the best known, but they're not always the strongest. Many other countries, they face competition. Not in Canada. In Canada, it is a red and white monopoly, coast to coast. And it gives the Hells Angels a power in this country that they don't have anywhere else on the globe.
The book is Angels of Death, Inside the Bikers' Global Crime Empire. I'm speaking with the author Julian Sher, along with William Marsden, and Angels of Death is published by Knopf Canada.